There was a law communicated privately to Moses and written by him in a book called the Book of Law, which consisted of instructions in regards to meats, drink, feast days, diver washings, and carnal ordinances, in which was deposited not in the Ark of the Covenant, but by its side. The difference between the Ten Commandments and Moses' Book of Law was this. The Ten Commandments lay in unapproachable majesty inside the golden ark, deep graven by the finger of deity himself, and in the imperishable agate of the mountains. The law of types and ceremonies lay outside the ark, written with ink by human hands on perishable parchment. In plain English, Moses' handwritten law was written in a book with ink. God's law was written with his finger, engraved into stone. Moses' law was placed outside the Ark of the Covenant. The Ten Commandments were placed inside the Ark of the Covenant. Ink gets blotted out. You don't blot out stone. Paper or parchment, which is animal skin, gets nailed to the cross. Stone does not get nailed to wood. The handwritten book of the law contained ordinances that told the Israelites the way to carry out sacrifices and feasts. Hey everyone, my name is Lee, and these passages are often taken out of context. This is video number 5, the final video of the Meat series. There are some verses that I'm going to be reading that you may wonder, why is he reading all of these verses? And the answer is context. This is the reason so many people have trouble with Colossians chapter 2, verse 14 to 17. It's because they think it's saying something that it's not saying. And this verse is taken so out of context that many people are comparing apples to oranges when they read it. So bear with me as we go through these verses. In 2 Chronicles chapter 33 and verse 8 it says, "And I will not again remove the foot of Israel from the land which I have appointed for your fathers, only if they are careful to do all that I have commanded them, according to the whole law and the statutes and the ordinances by the hand of Moses." Now, were the Ten Commandments written by the hand of Moses? Absolutely not. They were written by the finger of God. The verse we just read said, only if they are careful to do all that I have commanded them according to the whole law and the statutes and the ordinances by the hand of Moses. Deuteronomy chapter 31 in verses 24 to 26 and verse 28 says this, "And it came to pass when Moses had made an end of writing the words of this law in a book until they were finished, that Moses commanded the Levites, which bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord, saying, Take this book of the law and put it in the side of the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, that it may be there for a witness against thee." Now, where did it say to put the book of law? The law book? It said, put it in the side of the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God. And what was the book to be a witness against? That it may be there for a witness against thee. All right, continuing in verse 28, it says, "Gather unto me all the elders of your tribes and your officers, that I may speak these words in their ears, and call heaven and earth to record against them." Now, Colossians chapter 2 and verse 14 says, "Blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to his cross." Is this starting to make sense? The handwriting of ordinances that were against them were from the handwritten book of law that was written by the hand of Moses, not the Ten Commandments, which were written by the finger of God. What ordinances did Moses write in this book? Well, it was the Mosaic ordinances that pointed forward to the redemptive work of Christ. The picture is going to get more clear. Stay with me. Now, when I read these verses, I want you to ask yourself, does this verse point to the coming of Christ and his work to redeem us from sin, to make atonement for sin? Let's start in 1 Chronicles chapter 23 and verse 31. It says, "And at every presentation of a burnt offering to the Lord on the Sabbaths and the new moons and on the set feasts by number according to the ordinances governing them, regularly before the Lord." This obviously points to the work that Christ is going to do on earth. It deals with ceremonial sacrifices, right? 2 Chronicles chapter 2 and verse 4 says, "Behold, I am building a temple for the name of the Lord my God, to dedicate it to him, to burn before him sweet incense, for the continual showbread, for the burnt offerings, morning and evening, on the Sabbaths, on the new moons, and on the set feasts of the Lord our God. This is an ordinance forever to Israel." Again, this points to the sacrifice of Christ. It points to the cross. Does the Bible clearly distinguish between the Sabbaths, which foreshadowed Christ's redemptive work, and the seventh-day Sabbath of the fourth commandment? Leviticus chapter 23 and verse 24 says that the first day of the seventh month was a Sabbath. Pay attention, because it's not the seventh-day Sabbath. It's a Sabbath that does not necessarily fall on the seventh day. It falls on whatever day lands on the first day of the seventh month. And then it says also the 10th day of this seventh month, the Day of Atonement, Leviticus 23:27, was declared to be a Sabbath. Verse 32. I want you to notice that both of these Sabbaths could not possibly be the seventh-day Sabbath. Look at how they fall. It's more than a week apart. The first day of the seventh month, the 10th day of the seventh month. Like our birthday, these ceremonial Sabbaths fall on specific calendar days, not specific weekdays. Does your birthday fall on the same weekday every year? No, it falls on the same calendar day every year. October 27th, 2021 fell on Wednesday this year. October 27th, 2022 falls on Thursday. The seventh-day Sabbath is not linked to calendar days of the month, but it's linked to the weekly cycle. Leviticus 23:37 and 38 states that all of the holy convocations with their meat offerings and drink offerings were beside the Sabbaths of the Lord, not on the Sabbath of the Lord. So how do we know which is the Sabbath of the Lord? Well, Exodus chapter 20 and verse 10 declares that the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord. Did the seventh-day Sabbath point forward to Christ's redemptive work? No, it points us back to Christ's creative work. It points us back to creation. The seventh-day Sabbath wasn't a shadow of things to come. It wasn't to point forward to the coming of the Messiah, because there was no sin when the seventh-day Sabbath was created. The shadow of things to come was the sacrifices, the offerings on these ceremonial Sabbaths. The fall into sin caused the need for ritual worship to bridge a separation between God and humans and to express faith in a coming Redeemer. If you read the passages in context, you won't mistake the seventh-day Sabbath with the feast days and ceremonial Sabbaths. The problem becomes apparent when those reading haven't learned the purpose of the sacrificial services, the purpose of these feast days. The Sabbaths of the Mosaic ordinances pointed forward to Christ's redemptive work. The seventh-day Sabbath of the fourth commandment points back to Christ's creative work. Food, drink, new moons, Sabbaths. Remember this language used. Numbers chapter 29 and verse 39 says, "These you shall present to the Lord at your appointed feasts, besides your vowed offerings and your free will offerings, as your burnt offerings and your grain offerings, as your drink offerings and your peace offerings." Hang in there. You're about to see something that's absolutely mind-blowing. You probably have not been told this in your church or taught this. So let's continue. Ezekiel chapter 45 and verse 17 says, "Then it shall be the prince's part to give burnt offerings, grain offerings, and drink offerings at the feasts, new moons, and the Sabbaths, and at all the appointed seasons of the house of Israel. He shall prepare the sin offering, the grain offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offerings to make atonement for the house of Israel." The typical Sabbaths of the Mosaic ordinances pointed forward to Christ's redemptive work. The seventh-day Sabbath of the fourth commandment points back to Christ's creative work. This is so important to understand. That's why I keep repeating this, so it can sink in, because you're about to see exactly what the context of this passage is. Let me put this into more simple terms. The seventh-day Sabbath is a reminder of creation, right? It points us back to creation, to Christ's work in creating all things. The Mosaic ordinances pointed forward to the work Christ will be completing on earth to make atonement for sin. It points to the crucifixion. Colossians chapter 2, verse 14, 16, and 17 says, having blotted out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us. That's Moses' handwritten book of law, which was contrary to us. Where did we just read that? Deuteronomy chapter 31 and verse 26. Take this book of the law and put it beside the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, that it may be there as a witness against you. It's contrary to them, right? Contrary to us. And took it out of the way, nailing it to his cross. There it is. What was nailed to the cross? Moses' handwritten book of the law, written on parchment, not stone. This was not the Ten Commandments. Let no man therefore judge you in meat offerings, and drink offerings, as we've just read, or in respect of an holy day, or of the new moon, or Sabbath days. All the ceremonial ordinances we just read about. The ceremonial Sabbaths that were not the seventh-day Sabbath, which are a shadow of things to come, but the body is of Christ, or New King James says the substance is of Christ. These food offerings, called meat offerings in the King James Version, drink offerings, festivals, new moon, holy days, and ceremonial Sabbaths that landed on specific calendar days were a shadow of Christ. There were Jews that were raised with these services, and they were judging others for not participating in these rituals, these feasts, these sacrifices. They were having trouble letting that go. The ultimate sacrifice was made, so don't let anyone judge you for not keeping these days anymore, because Christ has finished the earthly part of his redemptive work. The ultimate sacrifice has already been made. This passage has nothing to do with eating unclean animals. It has to do with not participating in these food, drink, new moons, and Sabbaths that were the shadow of things to come. The seventh-day Sabbath isn't a shadow. It's a memorial of creation. It's why we worship him, because he's the creator of all things. The food laws weren't the written law of Moses. They weren't written by the hand of Moses. They were commanded by God. Moses didn't declare what was good for us to eat. God told us what we could eat. Are these food laws the Ten Commandments? No, not specifically. But I think coveting something because you desire it, like bacon, is no different than what Adam and Eve did with the forbidden fruit. They ate it when they were told not to. Now, there weren't any Jews that Paul or any other author in the Bible was trying to comfort for eating pork or any other unclean animal, because pigs weren't food. They weren't considered food. Just like we don't see cats or dogs as food, even if others might. When we talk about food, cats and dogs just don't enter our mind. Just like pigs didn't enter theirs with the discussion of food. This wasn't a topic of conversation. Topics of conversation were food sacrificed to idols, eating with unwashed hands, celebrating ceremonial Sabbaths, and giving food and drink offerings to God. The misunderstandings of these passages stem from not having a good understanding of the Old Testament and the sanctuary services in the Old Testament that pointed to the cross. The gospel of the Old Testament is important to understand because from Genesis to Revelation lays the story of how Christ would save the world from sin. It's not even possible to completely understand the New Testament unless you understand the Old. This is why many people take the book of Revelation literally and don't see the symbolism in Revelation, because they don't understand the Old Testament. There are passages that you can't even begin to understand in the book of Revelation if you haven't read the book of Daniel, which is in the Old Testament. Let me give you another example. In Genesis, we have the creation account. On day 1, God said, "Let there be light." Jesus is the light of the world. On the second day, God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." The Bible emphasizes water. Jesus is the living water. Do you still think this is a coincidence? Okay, so on the third day, the first fruits were brought forth from the ground, right? They rose up on the third day. The first fruits rose up on the third day. Think about this. On the third day of creation, the first fruits rose up from the ground. Jesus Christ, who was the first fruits, was brought forth from the ground, and he rose on the third day. The entire Bible has Jesus throughout and his plan for our salvation. You have to know where to look for him. We are only 13 verses into Genesis when we get to day 3 of creation, and we see Jesus in each one. If you think the Old Testament is outdated, it's not. The Old Covenant has been made new, but the Old Testament still applies today, as it is the other half of the picture that you're missing if you only read the New Testament. Now, with all this in mind, let's read again. Blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to his cross. Let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of an holy day or the new moon or the Sabbath days, which are a shadow of things to come, but the body is of Christ. The New King James Version says, having wiped out the handwriting of requirements that was against us, which was contrary to us, and he has taken it out of the way, having nailed it to the cross. So let no one judge you in food or in drink, or regarding a festival or a new moon or Sabbaths, which are a shadow of things to come, but the substance is of Christ. Colossians chapter 2, verses 14, 16, and 17. So I pray that this video series helps somebody in regards to eating unclean animals. And I also pray that you understand that it's not the eating of unclean animals that defiles you. It's your heart that's defiled when you disobey God. Thank you for watching.